I base my beliefs on evidence, and so far, all of the evidence points to God not being real. So, to me, atheism makes the most sense. Taking into account how long humans have been around and how only 2,000 years ago, the current God that humans worship decided to talk to a particular group of desert dwellers and command them to prove themselves by following all these rules and laws that people keep to this day, it sounds pretty silly. When I was little and we were studying about the Greek and Roman gods, I used to wonder why God let them be so wrong and why people throughout history worshipped other gods. I mean, wars were fought, lives lost, culture and ethics shaped by the belief in those gods. And those gods always seemed so silly to me. And I think 1,000 years from now, people will learn about our silly God that divided the world and caused so much strife and pain and think the same thing that I thought about the Greek and Roman gods when I was little. It just seems very silly. The idea of what God was while growing up was love, but on condition. Then again, I think that's true for almost every human's idea of God. It's just, I know the love I feel for my kids, and I may be hurt by their actions, but I love them unconditionally. They grew in me. It's as though I put arms and legs on my heart and let it wander around. And as far as I can imagine in any scenario, I would love them. And I can't imagine making them praise me or worship me or do as I say forever and ever, or I would punish them for eternity. I mean, that's some sadistic shit when you think about it. So the God that I grew up with and believed in was perfect and infallible. So any of the bad stuff you couldn't question. And his human mouthpieces were perfect and infallible. At least Mormons believe that Joseph Smith was infallible when he was speaking as the prophet. And Muslims believe that the Prophet Muhammad was perfect in every way, in every waking minute. He could do no wrong, and every part of his life should be emulated. God is always a man and always holds dominion over women. And in Mormonism, God has many wives, with one that he favors the most, depending on how much meat you've been given from the church. So if you read through holy books, what is missing from this perfect Sky Daddy's words and actions and his perfect mouthpieces' words and actions are empathy, mercy, unconditional love, critical thinking, forgiveness, and equal rights. When you hate on skin color, religion, sexuality, and gender because your God says it's the right thing to do, the bad guy in the story starts to look like the real good guy. This all-knowing, all-powerful God supposedly made men better than women and gave them more rights and even decides who is damned before they're born. That God is perfect. And those books that people still kill, shun, judge, and fight with people over, they were written by primitive man. And there are people who devote their entire lives to these primitive words. I never thought of it like that until it was mentioned to me during a discussion about a pink unicorn. A friend of mine had posed the idea of a pink unicorn to me while we were arguing about my belief in God. He told me that he believed in a pink unicorn who had made the earth and still controlled all of us. And I laughed at this. It was preposterous. So he asked me to prove the pink unicorn wasn't real. I couldn't prove it wasn't real. And he interjected, "You mean the primitive books written by primitive man with primitive ideas about the world?" And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I go with what ideas make the most sense to me, and a belief in invisible beings who control everything, and books that got it all wrong, that told stories of violence, rape, slavery, and atrocious horrors towards children, women, minorities, homosexuals, and those outside their faiths, simply because this being said it was okay, makes no sense to me. This same invisible being who supposedly was showing proof of himself all over the place 2,000 years ago, who sent the prophet Jesus down, said he'd be right back, and 2,000 years later still hasn't showed, and his fans haven't even asked for a refund yet. And it's been so long that groupies went off and started new religions, and their groupies went off, and so forth and so on, until you get to Mormonism, Scientology, Jehovah's Witnesses, and more. Once you come to the realization that the idea of a God is nothing more than humans trying to make sense of a very confusing world and not having all the answers for the whys, it starts to make sense. Belief in God, whether it does social good or not, is not something that you can just go back to believing in. You can't just start believing in Santa once the jig is up and you know that it's your parental units doing the fooling. And I feel bad when I hear religious people talk about how atheists hate God, or ask how atheists can be good people without the fear of eternal punishment from Sky Daddy. I don't know. It feels good to do good. It feels good to be nice. It feels good to do what is best for other people and to love and care for others. Maybe power feels better. I don't know. I've had very little and likely never will. But I know that positive feels better than negative. And knowing right from wrong, fairness, and not wanting to do harm is innate. It seems impossible to me that one can even hate what is not real. I mean, I suppose you can hate the idea of God and what that represents, like religion, wars, judgments, conformity, but that would be like hating Santa instead of hating how commercialized Christmas is. If you genuinely believe Santa is real and you're a fully functioning person over the age of 11, you probably need psychological help because that's what we call crazy. And yet, believing in an invisible dude who supposedly wrote some books through human hands, shockingly, who has never shown evidence of existing except through human eyewitness accounts, shockingly again, it's totally cool. I understand how scary the idea of the unknown is and how hard it is to lose loved ones. I mean, death is terrifying, and religion gave me comfort in believing that I would be with my loved ones, and that's very appealing in its own way. It feeds the ego, that idea that we are much more important than we really are and that we will live forever. It's appealing that religion sells you the guidebooks and people with all the answers. But don't ever trust anyone who says they have all the answers. Nobody has all the answers, and if they did, we would stop asking, wondering, searching, and doing. Humans have an innate curiosity that has fueled the most amazing things. We put people in freaking space. Science and technology answers more and more questions every day, some of which create new problems, but this is why humans are so cool. We'll go on and come up with new answers and correct old wrongs and continue to seek, strive, and discover. And that is the thing. We have a lot of answers that we didn't have way back then, but we still don't have all the answers. And that's fine by me. Just because we don't know something yet doesn't mean we have to make something up to explain it. It's okay to say, I don't know. I used to stay awake at night, worried about death and being punished for eternity for decisions in my flawed human life that didn't take any time to think about at all. I was terrified of dead people, and I believed in monsters. Real monsters, like Satan. In fact, I spent most of my time afraid, worried, and trying to prove my love to this dictator that I could never see or hear from. And I still think about dying now and again. I get a quick panic in my belly, and then it goes away. I don't live in fear of what-ifs, or invisible beings, or even death anymore. I have peace and happiness where fear once resided. And as far as death goes, I can't predict when it will happen. I don't remember coming into existence, and I reckon going out will be pretty much the same, and I'm okay with it. My energy lives on and feeds the life cycle, and I think that's pretty cool. From stardust back to stardust.